The Wellness Show, episode 314. Welcome to The Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. This is Tyhson Banighen, and this is The Wellness Show. And today we're talking with Lois Gueret, and it's a return. She's been on the show numerous times before. But the exciting part about this is not only we're going to talk about what's happening in personal planetary evolution, but she's going to talk about her brand new book, which is in the midst of being edited and getting ready to publish. And she's in the midst of fundraising for this. So this has been a long-term project for you, right?
It has, yes. I think I first talked with you in 2016 when we were still living in Newfoundland. Yeah. So long term, been a labor of love.
Personal honesty of your own experience, right?
It is and it isn't. I call it an intrepid guide to spiritual evolution because I use my experiences to help people find some guidance for themselves. So it is and it isn't.
So it's like a manual then.
I think, yeah, it is like.
Oh, I was just saying, when I came to planet Earth here, I was really complaining because I couldn't find an operating manual for impasse. And this planet made no sense to me. So I think having a book like yours that actually explains what it is to be an empath and what you can expect and how to make a go of it, so to speak, it would be very, very valuable.
I think so, yes. Now, we talked for a second there about the fact that you've done other interviews with me. And did I read that right? This is episode 314 for you. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it's 314.
Yes. So I don't know how many people remember who I am.
Well, why don't you reintroduce yourself as an amazing person that you are.
Okay. This is going to be fun with this little bit of lag. I feel like I'm on a CB radio. Over.
We can say over and out, over and out. Come in, Charlie.
So I was primarily a rescue medium and paranormal consultant. And I branched out to do spirit mediumship and readings. I've worked on becoming a healer, an energy healer with different modalities. And I also took my shamanic training and I got a diploma in metaphysics so I could be a reverend. So I'm actually writing the book under the title Reverend. And you and I talked for the first time on this show when we were in Newfoundland, and that was in 2016, and that's when I first started writing this book. And since then, we've come back to BC, and we've had one interview here with you. That was the last one we did together. And so we're still in the same house, and we're probably going to be out of here on the last day of January 2020 to wherever we're going to end up landing. So I have had an interesting experience with the changes that have happened since 2017 till now in the location that we're at, in the lower mainland. So I wanted to do that.
Well, you're in a very high energy place, aren't
I
you?
think so. It's certainly an interesting place for the energy. And it certainly is a place where there's lots of changes going on. There's lots of growth and development and lots of things that are changing on a physical level in this area. That's for sure. Well, it's
known also as the major Sasquatch area.
It is, and there's been lots of interesting encounters with Sasquatch that I've experienced since we've moved in here. The more recent one was with an elderly Sasquatch who was communicating with me telepathically, and he disclosed that he was somewhere around 200 years old, and that he was the leader. I guess if you had to have a hierarchy, or if you had to use human terms, he was a leader, and that he was planning on retiring soon. He called himself White Feather Tip, because he claims that sometimes you don't see him, you just see a flash of white, and people think it's a bird with a white feather tip flashing in the forest. So that's what he was introducing himself to be as. But yeah, so that was interesting. That was my.
So what he's going to retire?
He says he's done, and that there is sometime in the next couple of years, there's going to be somebody else who steps up and fills his shoes of his group or his clan or his family. Yeah. So I still have to get a hold of the local.
So was his job to communicate with humans?
Yes, to communicate with his people. He said to me several times that I wasn't his people, and he didn't quite understand why I was talking to him. But yeah, but he did. He entertained talking to me, and it went okay. Yeah. We had brought him some apples, and that seemed to be the reason he was talking to me. So.
So let's go back to some of the changes that you've experienced.
Yes, and I think it's going to be interesting to find out, because you're in the Okanagan area and I'm down here in the Fraser Valley. I want to, as we're talking here, figure out how much stuff correlates, how many things that you've been experiencing recently. So to focus, what I've noticed just recently, I'm calling entering into universal consciousness. That we're going through another step in our consciousness evolution. And so prior we were in unity consciousness, right? But we're actually taking another step from that vibrational wise, and we're entering into what I'm calling universal consciousness. And the things that I've noticed, they're very esoteric, because we're talking about energies that we haven't really got language for yet. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to define what the transition from fourth dimensional energy to fifth dimensional energy is going to be, because we're experiencing it in the now. So everything's new, and everything's a little bit hard to define. But the best I can do to explain it, so for those of us who are light workers, and there's so many, and those of us who've done work, who have been doing the work to transition from third dimensional energies to fourth on to fifth, and it's self-healing work, so that's very important. The self-healing work has been very important for all of us to do. There's some of us, like yourself and myself, and probably a lot of people who are in the questers and people that you know and associate with dowsing, who are doing geomancy and alchemy right now, and have been working to realign a lot of the energy grid and the energy centers and stuff on the planet as our planet is evolving. Correct? So you're still with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There seems to be more interested in geomancy and learning about power centers and sacred centers, and how to work with landscape divas and landscape temples and reactivating the sacred sites. There seems to be more attunement to that, right? And going to old older sites. I'm working with somebody in England who is next to standing stones, and he's being able to go and reactivate the site. So yeah, there seems to be more interest in those sorts of things.
Yeah, and like you were saying, going to the old sacred sites, it really is a relearning of stuff that we kind of buried in our consciousness, and it's coming back to us. So for me, the realigning is happening to the etheric structures of the planet. So that's, like you were saying, the energy centers, the grids, the communication, realigning, and also communing or rejoining our place in the dimensions. So there's lots of talk and lots of experiences, like I was saying earlier with my Sasquatch friend there, lots of talk with dimensional or other dimensional beings that's suddenly on the increase. The frequency right now for this part of our evolution has pretty much peaked.
Oh no, I'm just really interested in what you're saying, and realizing that as we raise our vibrational frequency, we are getting to commune with other beings at the same frequency, whether it's Sasquatch or whales or dolphins or the angelic kingdom. So it's a very, very exciting time. I did have one question. Are you experiencing, as we're activating the meridians of the earth, are you finding that there's an inner, change with your own meridians that parallels that? Like, are you experiencing inner major changes inside of yourself as well?
I am. From my perspective, it's come on an emotional level, and there's an emotional clarity. So becoming the observer has become a lot easier for most people, for myself included. I have found that I don't get caught up in drama as much anymore. I have also found that it's easy to step back and take a more communal point of view. How does that play out for me? It's about having credit. It's about taking responsibility. So in a lot of scenarios, I'm seeing that because we go to a more communal state, there's no one person who is solely responsible or solely taking credit. We're working more on a universal consciousness or universal unity on all levels. Does that make sense? And that's what I've experienced just with the shifts that have happened on the.
Yeah, I'm finding a more a collaborative approach with key people like Amy Jo Ellis, myself, and a new person who I'm working with now. There seems to be an understanding that the way to get a lot of transformation, both inwardly and outwardly, like inward and on the planet, is by working as a group or as a collective. So it's a new experience about how to come to terms with any disagreements and how to achieve equality or collaboration when we're working together. And I'm finding that very exciting.
Yeah, when you actually get an opportunity to practice that, what I've experienced is that there's this flow that happens. I think it's because we're creating on we're creating on a celestial level instead of what we were doing before. And when you get into that flow and you have that collaboration, it's exponential and things happen quite quickly.
Absolutely.
Which also means that you have to take great
care. Absolutely.
Because if you end up in the wrong group, you end up manifesting something that's not meant to be here, then you've got a mess to clean up.
Yeah, that's really true. I think there's a deeper relationship. I call it the triune relationship, as I learned to work more collaboratively with the angelic and the elemental kingdom. And I'm more inclined to give away a lot of what I would take on myself to give it away to the angelic kingdom, to let upstairs take care of it. So it's more like asking or requesting um, or invocations, asking the angelic kingdom to please take care of X, Y, or Z, or go do this healing over there, or whatever, or to help solve this particular problem. So I'm learning more to surrender. There's got really nothing to do with me, but I am to ask, right? If I don't ask, I don't receive.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, you do have to ask. That's really important these days too. And I have found that um, where in the past I was hesitant because I felt like uh, I shouldn't ask for too much, or I shouldn't be dependent, or I shouldn't present myself as, being demanding, like the demanding child who wants this, that, and the other thing. But I've found now, actually, those moments when I get to beating my head against the wall, and I'm like, okay, now I'm frustrated. I need something to change. And I vocalize that. It doesn't take that long. Sometimes it can be almost instantaneous. So now it's a game for me. I play with it. I play with it in my intuition and see what it is that I can change. So I don't know if you've
Yeah, I
experienced
like
it
that.
too.
I think the biggest obstacle to me, what we were talking about, is working with technology. It's created by humans. It has human mind consciousness. It doesn't have a lot of a spiritual matter in our technology yet, because of the level of those that create it. I look forward to spiritual technology or spiritually based technology. So getting past my frustration around technology and coming to terms with it so that I don't literally blow it out of the water or fry the technology with my energy has been my biggest learning experience for me in the last, well, I would say, like I mentioned before, we started talking, over the last 3 years, I've had nothing but computer problems, trying to get computers to work co-creatively with me. And I think I'm pretty much at the point where I can say that we've come to a new co-creative relationship with the technology in this household, which has taken a long time coming.
Yes. Oh, I completely understand that. Yeah. And then there's also the more shadow side of that, and you don't know how much, because there are people out there who would rather that you and I don't talk about these things and don't give hope or healing, or that we don't unify with the general public. And it's to their advantage to manipulate technology, so that we have a difficult time doing this. So that's also part of probably what you've been experiencing too. I certainly know it has been with me. There was one point where
Yeah, absolutely.
I had created 2.5 new chapters, and I had done a major edit on the rest of the book. And Robert, I closed the computer down, and Robert and I went and did something, and it was a whole day later I came back to the computer and opened my book up, and only to discover that all the new chapters I had just written and saved, and all the update work that I had just done was gone. So someone hacked into my computer and got rid of it. And you want to know what the new chapters were about? They were about shadow technology, our contact with universal consciousness, our contact with extraterrestrial beings, and all that sort of information. And they had completely gotten rid of it. So I had to do a whole bunch of changes with my computers. I had to make it so that they didn't have access to it so easily. Now everything is on an external hard drive. My computer I unplug it from the internet when I'm working on the book, and I unplug my external before I plug it back into the internet. I've got all these cautions in there. So, and I've got
Well,
backups and
I think
backups.
that's really important.
Yeah, so that's saying once bit.
I have a German friend, he talks about the backup to the backup. I'm not quite that addicted yet, but backups are critically important, no doubt about it. And you mentioned technology. I work as helping people free themselves from, being an exorcist or whatever you want to call that. And a lot of cases have to do with intrusive technology. Like I know it's been going on since the 70s, but much more intensive now, where voices are actually being heard in people's heads, coming through TVs and coming through all sorts of technology into the person's household. And it's been really scary for them, and trying to help them free themselves from the external mind control that's going on has been a real eye-opener for me of just how advanced the technology is, that governments have access to really, really mess with us.
Oh gosh,
if they so choose.
Yeah, I think that it's probably been around a lot longer than we realize. It took quite a long time for most of us to wake up to the fact that someone else, a person, not an energy being or a spirit or a ghost or whatever, but a person out there could have technology which would mess with us on that level. And I think that sometimes in the past, I was also deceived by things that I was experiencing. It doesn't mean that I wasn't successful in changing outcome for clients. It just means that I have a completely different approach now. And that's one of the first things I check for, is the possibility that they could be influenced by mind control. So.
Yeah, there's all the potential of who's showing up, to supposedly guide you, or who you're channeling. You have to be very, very, very careful about, their authenticity. I think to me, that's why dowsing is so valuable, is to be able to check in and because they sound good, they're brilliant, they have all the right words, they look the right way, or they act the right way, but literally the clue is their soulless. And so I know they have a job to do, and I understand what their job is, and I don't have as much fear around what their role is, but the real role for us to wake up. So I'd rather wake up as early as possible, rather than later.
Yes. Yeah, so that kind of ties back into having emotional clarity and what's going on with the empaths currently. And I think that, I don't know if you remember me talking about the first firing of the empath grid that happened in 2016.
No, I don't remember that. Or if I do, let's talk about it again. So talk about that. What's the empath grid?
Well, I saw that this form of communication for empaths was ignited, or was starting to be functioning again. It was something that was shut down, that we made an agreement at a certain point that in order for our evolution to happen in a safe way, we would shut down certain spiritual technologies. And now that we're getting to the age point that we are in our evolution, this is an opportunity for us to fully embrace who we actually are. So we're remembering who we actually are. And a part of that is the empathic side of ourselves, and how many people were either born in this current generation or this current cycle with empathic abilities, or suddenly had them waken up at a certain point in their life. So the empathic grid I saw was a communication grid interlaid in the axonal grid surrounding our planet. So it's kind of like it's inlaid in there. And if you try, you can actually see it. If you're someone who can see the axotonal grid, you'll see that grid in there also. And the purpose of it is that once we get our frequencies raised to the point, and we are there, there's enough people now, the majority of the people have the empathic abilities and have raised their vibrational frequency to the point where they can no longer, they don't have to just be receivers, they are capable of being transmitters. So this communication grid is for that. It's a way of being communal. It's a way of connecting to each other on an empathic, telepathic level, and creating real change, in real time change, if we so chose to.
Yeah, my experience is working with Divine Mother in a group that, I guess the term would be runs Divine Mother energies, that allows us to work not only with Divine Mother, but with the angelic kingdom. So it's almost like we're creating a new neural network of consciousness on the planet, which is, you know, really tied into Gaia, or the brain of all consciousness.
That's a great way to put it.
Or the Divine Mother connected to the Divine Earth Mother.
Yeah. So with that was the first firing. I know that there's been a second one, but I didn't get very much information on that second one. It was just, I think it really happened on an individual basis. But the third one that we're experiencing right now is empaths becoming so aware of influences. And like, once again, because they're the opportunity to understand completely how to interact on an emotional level with universal consciousness is presented to us. And I think that comes back to, it's a third firing that we're going through right now. We have the ability to manage our emotional expression. We have the ability to go, okay, well, that's something I want to experience myself first before I present it to anybody else. So at this point, say if something happened and you had an angry reaction to it, that's okay. But if you're an empath, you want to make sure that you experience that emotion before you project it out to anybody else. You want to have care and consideration. And I think we are indeed at that point.
Right.
We don't have, there's people who have done the work, the majority of the people on the planet who have done the work are at the point where there is no longer a huge pendulum swing. We do have a very deep emotional expression, but it no longer has a big range. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is emotional intelligence, that we are learning that things like the technology of letting go, rather than getting carried away by our emotions. Like before, we would be further out on the pendulum before we could catch ourselves, right? Now we can almost see it as it begins emotion, and we have a time enough to make a choice how we want to react to it. And so we can modulate our interactions, like you say, more carefully, rather than just letting the emotion run the show and then catching ourselves sort of with our foot in our mouth after the fact, right, of saying things that were not necessarily appropriate. At least I'm finding that for myself, and it's a bit of a blessing, is not to be so emotionally on the roller coaster.
Yes, and it's also given Gaia consciousness an opportunity to trust us again. That we're going to be okay. That we're not going to do something that's going to be inadvertently harmful. Yeah. So one of my questions has been, when I was setting up for this interview, was just, like I mentioned in the beginning here, was just how much of this everybody else who's out there and yourself, whoever's in the Okanagan, I'm wondering just how many people have in the last couple of months, because it's been really intense and very clear to me that this is what's going on. And it's been in the last 3 months that this has changed. I don't know if you've noticed, maybe I could even say it's the deepening, that it's been present for a couple of months now, but the last 3 have been more of a deepening to it.
I know from within myself that there's been major changes and transformation. One of them, which is so obvious and took me so long to figure out, is that, I do work pretty much with empaths, and to come to that realization that that's who I'm supposed to work with, and that's who I have been working with all the way along, really has allowed my business to exponentially grow, because now I'm resonating with my own inner frequency and those that I'm assisting. So that was a big quantum jump for me. And also coming to the realization that everybody's empathic as we move into this higher level of consciousness. Some are waking up, like you said, to the fact, some having a near-death experiences or something that shocks them into this. Or, I've had somebody who was a client phone me and said, I just got to get hold of you because I had the most amazing experience. This person she was Chinese, and she died, and she appeared in my head and said, you have to solve my murder. She says, I never had this experience before. And now she can talk to the other side and understand about a person's soul contract. This was all new to her. She'd never had that experience ever before.
Yes.
It was like so it was sort of like a trigger went off inside of herself. This is the time for you to fully wake up. I have another client who's running Kundalini, doesn't know what to do with it, full-blown Kundalini. There's no manual for it. She doesn't know how to manage it. It's just like overwhelming hot flashes that carry her away. She doesn't know whether it's good or bad or indifferent. And so, there's lots of people going through these major shifts as they're coming back online, so to speak. Like you said, Mother Gaia is starting to trust us, so she's allowing these neural networks to fit into her neural networks, so we have this higher levels of consciousness.
Yes. So, and that's just a recent thing. I find that very promising because at the beginning of this year, and I'm pretty sure I talked to you about this when I was up there and I visited your place, I was having a lot of doubts. To me, it felt very defeated the beginning of this year. That, and it was probably for the first 6 months of this year, actually. There was just so much stuff going on that I thought, oh no, we didn't make it. It's another failed attempt. What are we going to do? But it turns out, for me, and I don't know if this is true for everybody else, but what we were going through was the last clearing out of the third dimensional energies. And there was still tags and little cords there to all that physical stuff. And it did eventually clear out, thank goodness. I'm no longer in that place where I'm seeing nothing but doubt. So, and I think that was part of the empathic stuff also. I really do. Now, interestingly enough, because of what's going on, and because we've actually realized that, oh, hey, we are a part of the bigger picture, that with intelligence we can co-create what we need to move forward into the future. What's happening is a simplicity. And so, for example, all this that's going on currently with Greta and the environmental movement and climate change and all the things that we're now realizing are what the cause and effect is. So even if we say this has caused our climate change, or the climate on the planet is controlled by the sun, if we were to say, okay, well, that has been scientifically proven, However, what we do during this control of the sun is really important, is really relevant. So the simple answer to that is, if we have the sun influencing us and heating up the planet, and we have a problem with CO2, we should just be planting more trees. And it's so simple. That's the answer.
Yeah, it is so simple.
You want the planet to cool down? Start planting more trees. You know, it doesn't mean that that there's doom and gloom to admit that. It doesn't mean that we're killing the planet. It doesn't mean that the sun's killing the planet. It just means let's make our life more quality and do something about this, right?
In the 70s, I was involved in ecoforestry, and I wrote a chapter for a book on ecoforestry called Ecoforest Trust, and sort of which was looking at, rather than carbon tax, at the forest as ability to sequester CO2,
Yes.
and that the way that to monitor it was to do by satellite, was what the forest cover was per nation state, and that the offset was to plant more forests. And I took it to the World Bank and presented it to the World Bank. And their attitude was, oh, this is very interesting, but where's the economics for this? I said, well, look, this is the idea. You're the economist. You figure out the economics. Oh, no. It isn't, if it doesn't have an economic analysis, we can't deal with it. But for me, it doesn't take many brains to figure out plant trees. And if you look at that on a global way, we're going to have healthy, oxygen to sustain life. We're going to lower down the temperature of the planet. So the interesting thing you're saying is there's two views going on. Climate change is not true. In other words, an amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not what's driving climate changes, because all the whole solar system is warming up, and it's a periodic cycle that's happened and will happen again. But the point that's being missed on the spiritual level is we have a direct relationship with the sun, which is a living entity. We can communicate with and negotiate with that as a living entity. And yes, the whole solar system may be heating up, and yes, the CO2 may only be part of that overall problem, but together as human consciousness coming collectively together, we can renegotiate that contract with the sun, which is really only Gaia saying, Divine Mother and Gaia saying, wake up, humans, you have a responsibility as Earth stewards here. You're part of the global brain. If you want to live on this planet, you need to take on this responsibility as an Earth steward for sustaining all of life. And if you don't, there's consequences, right?
Yes.
I am not something that you can treat as a divine feminine like you always have, to just abuse and exploit and take whatever you want. Your time of reckoning is now.
Yes. That's why I call it universal consciousness, because we recognize that we have a place in the universe. It's not just a place amongst humanity. It's not just a place on this planet. All of a sudden, there is an awakening to outside influences that are probably, they're easier to prove on a scientific level than the existence of extraterrestrials, but they're there. And I do know that I see signs of climate change when I look out my window. I see signs of climate change when I review the natural environments that I've experienced for my 50 plus years. So I know that that's real. Now, is it causing hardship? I think it is. So we need to take some action to make sure that we're good for the planet, and that we start paying attention to what is actually going on. A couple of years ago, I had a discussion with someone, and I can't remember what their name was, but they were suggesting that the forest fires in BC could be a way of trying to gain property in a cheap way.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard that as part of the Agenda 21,
Yeah.
which is interesting because as an environmentalist, I was part of the Canadian delegation to UNCED in the second session, at the UN. So I can see both the positive and the negative of the UNCED agenda. And it's
Yeah.
like anything, like anything that man creates, there's polarity consciousness in it. It can be used to bring humanity together, or it can be used as a control mechanism.
Yeah.
And the control mechanism is, well, let's use that as a way to control people and get them into urban environments so we could have the land grab and all the rest. And there's no doubt in my mind that some of the evidence of the fires is they were human caused and they were done, with, high level technology from helicopters and all the rest of that. And, but all that craziness at one level isn't going to cut the mustard in the end. If we're working with the Divine Mother and with Gaia and with the angelic kingdom and doing the work that we're called to do, which is really what I would call stealth warriors, stealth eco-spiritual warriors, because nobody can track that work. Nobody knows that you're doing it. There's no way that there's a signal that's being broadcast. So you're under the radar and you can bring about, as a group, massive transformation and change that will offset all of this craziness. So as much as I agree with a lot of the conspiracy theories, and I just happened to be reading about who is behind Kennedy's assassination, and it was really quite an eye-opener this morning to understand the intrigue behind all that. But they're not going to win the day. I just know it in my heart of hearts that it's a foregone conclusion that the dinosaur is already keeled over in the swamp, is thrashing around. And if I was in the swamp with a dinosaur, I would say, get the hell out of the way. Let it go through its death throes. Don't try and poke it. Don't try and wake it up. Don't even pick it against it. Just let it go through its death throes and get out of the way. Because the new world is going to come no matter what. No matter what their agenda is, what craziness they're going to try and implement, it's not going to carry the day.
That's right. And I agree with you 100% there. Yeah. Yeah. So there's much hope. And I do know that there's so many people out there right now who are doing projects like you described, who are working on rectifying. And like Don Elzer likes to say, we need to have like a 500-year plan. That's what we need to get our heads around. It's not just this quick fix 10-year, 20-year, 100-year. Let's start out with, okay, well, what's the 500-year plan? Where are we going to be in 500 years from now? That should be our goal, right? And that we're not.
Yeah, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had government?
Sorry, go ahead.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had government where their job was to have a 500-year plan, and the only difference between the different parties was how are they going to implement the 500-year plan? But everybody had to agree on the plan. Instead of this craziness where the plan is only to the length of the mandate of the government, which is at the most 5 years between elections.
That's
the
right.
longest, right? So you have a 5-year plan that really can't do anything.
It's crazy. It's crazy because it's all deceptive, because the plan they come into office with is never meant to work. There's always the hidden plan behind that.
Yeah.
And so who knows really how long their plans are? We don't have any idea what they're working on. It'd be wonderful if we started getting, and I have to admit that there is places in the world that are great examples. Iceland keeps coming back to mind when I think about governments and political innovation, because they did some wonderful things there over the last little while. Yes. So we're almost at 2020. Have you had that date or that year in mind with things as we've been going through the last 10 years? Have you known that 2020 was significant in all of this?
Not really. I've never really thought about that. 2020 is a big four. So, 4 is really the earth, and, it's grounding everything as how I would see it into practicality. So maybe it's taking the spiritual ideas that we're talking about and bringing them into physical manifestation. And maybe we're going to see the results of what we call the new earth, literally coming through the veil as the matrix dissolves. I mean, I've been told that one day I'll wake up and the world will look entirely different. And every once in a while I do wake up and it's like there's cracks in the matrix, or there's sort of like there's cracks. Let's just call it cracks in the matrix. There's something bigger and more ineffable that seems to be appearing. And to me, maybe that next year is the more of the dissolving of the matrix and more clarity of the new earth coming through on this plane.
And I would agree with that. I wanted to quickly go through something that I have in the book. When I'm talking, I've titled it Tomorrow, that section of the book. And it's, when I'm referring to tomorrow in the book, I'm talking from 2020 to 2025 and 27, somewhere around that area. And that was the prediction I had in 2016 from my guides of when we'd be going through the last part of the fourth dimensional energies and starting the fifth dimensional energies. And at the time they were careful, like I said earlier, to say, this is something we can't really define until we're in it, because the language is going to be so new that even trying to explain it to someone who's not experiencing it at the time would be difficult. But they gave me a little list. So they said it was going to be the lifting in the fourth dimensional energies and the big implementation of the fifth dimensional energies. So as we're going through the next 5 to 7 years, this is what's going to be happening. And they talked about economic reformation. They said there would be a new expression of spiritual matters aligning with a new view of science. So it'll actually be going back to the roots, where science and spirituality were not separate. They were merged together. There's supposed to be a globalized political system which resembles a group of appointed elders rather than elected leaders. In other words, you'd have to earn your way to a leadership position. And that's not something that can happen when you're young. It has to be a position that's held with the respect of being an older person. There would be a centered and realistic sense of life purpose as it ties into how we educate ourselves. So a different educational system is supposed to also be implemented. Connection to the galaxy, so that we are just one of the many civilizations out there. And I would say that is also going to be, it's not just going to be a connection to the universe or a galaxy. It will be a connection to interdimensions also. So we will be interacting with the beings and the energy that occupies the planet with us. Stewardship of the planet, which includes mastering how we manage our food, water, and all environmental spaces. It should probably be at the top of the list at this point. Technological advancements for the good of all, including free energy. An integrated healthcare system, which includes university degrees for healing, natural medicine, energy medicine, and spiritual ministry. So that's a part of the educational change that we're supposed to be seeing. And as we're experiencing right now, actual settling in of our new emotional states, so that drama and conflicts don't exist any longer. So that pendulum swing that I was talking about, that we're not experiencing that pendulum swing anymore. That's part of that. So I wanted to bring that up because it's 2020 coming up here, and we are. It's interesting to me to have experienced that message coming through with channeled work that I did in 2016, and then all of a sudden this year happening and unfolding the way that it did, and me realizing that they were actually on track with that prediction, that 2020 is a pivotal year that we're coming up with.
Well, so that would be great to have that list and included in the show notes, because those are important signposts that are encouraging as we move through the next 7 years. You know, we could say, oh, check that one off, we're getting there. I do want to talk about, which sounds, this sounds strange, but in a workshop where we were doing past life regression, the person who was facilitating it said, well, you can do a future life jump. So I did that, and I found myself as being part of the Earth delegation to the International Galactic Federation. And we were submitting our documentations for acceptance because we had achieved world peace into the Federation. And I was part of that delegation. And so to me, that's always been, not that I was part of that delegation isn't relevant. It's just that we in some timeline somewhere we make it, and yes, we are accepted into the Intergalactic Federation. So to me, that's exciting. It gives me hope that even though I can't see it today and I can't see it tomorrow, and I may not even see it in this lifetime, but I'd love to see it in this lifetime. Yes. In some future lifetime, I know that it will occur.
That is,
and for that, I'm truly grateful.
Yes. Wow. That would be amazing. I had a similar dream to that all the way back in 2010. Do you want to hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the reasons why I moved to the Okanagan. Anyways, I was, in this dream, I was looking for the group of friends I had in the lower mainland. And I'm climbing the staircase to a convention. It's a huge staircase, like a spiral. It was on the side of this mountain. And I can't find any of my friends, the spiritual community that I was a part of back then. And I get to the top, and it was a convention that was being broadcast. So there was people who were attending, and there were separate rooms for these people to sit in, and they were watching the convention on big TV screens. And in the convention room, there was 7 tables with 7 people sitting around all of them, and they were representatives for various different spiritual attributes. And this included our extraterrestrial or star family at the same time. So I'm wandering around from room to room, still hoping that I'm going to find these friends that I'm supposed to be with. And I can't find them. So I don't know where I'm supposed to sit. I was confused. And all of a sudden, one of the people from these tables got up and came over and got me and said, do you realize that your chair is right here? So I was part of one of the tables. I was part of one of the 7 groups of 7 people. It was supposed to be broadcasting that. So that has never manifested.
Wonderful.
But I've always hoped that at some point, once again, like you said, the importance wasn't that I was a part of it in that moment. The importance was that maybe by dreaming it, I had made myself a part of it. That eventually something like this would happen at a future event. And the reason I couldn't find my friends is because that spiritual community was something that I was going to leave behind. So I had a whole new spiritual
That's
community
wonderful.
towards. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
as we wrap it up, tell me about the book, tell me about the title, tell me about the fundraising, and tell me when do you think it will be due?
okay, I can tell you all those things now because I've actually figured it all out. The book is called "Oh Fuck, You Mean There's More? An Intrepid Guide to Spiritual Evolution," and I have stuck with that title the whole way through this. Um, I have a Kickstarter campaign that's up and running right now to fund the editing of the book. And my editor and I have set up the timeline that the book will be able to be published somewhere around the end of January 2020. The Kickstarter campaign has rewards. So you can just make a donation if you want to, or you can pick one of the reward categories. And they're $10, $15, $25, $50, $100, and $250. So the $10 one is just a mention in the book, and then there's gradual prizes that accumulate as you go higher up. So for example, the $250 one includes everything that I've given as a reward. So there's the mention in the book. There's the book itself. There is a video that I'm promoting. There is a 2-hour conference at one point that gets added in there. And then there's actually at the $250 level, there's a hidden chapter that nobody else but those 5 contributors can have. So they get the extra chapter.
Wow, I love
it. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
great.
So I'm looking forward to it. The book itself is really intimate and personal and filled with a lot of my own experiences. And like I said at the beginning, but it is a guide to people in spiritual evolution. So I've done it in a way where my examples and my experience will help them find their own way. So like a manual, it's covering mystical and metaphysical material. It talks about geomancy and alchemy. I have a lot of work on the empathic side of things. I talk about our shadow self and how to embrace that properly. I talk about transmutational magic. I talk about shadow technology and also embracing our star family, so our extraterrestrial, the importance of extraterrestrial contact. And then I've got a final chapter in the book is called Seeing Your Footprint. And it's about the connection between sustainability and spiritual evolution. And it's a series of interviews. So I've transcribed 3 interviews that I've done from 3 different points of view. And it's really interesting and an uplifting way to end the book, because these 3 people have successfully walked their talk, and they're making a difference in the community that they're a part of, or the influence and interest they have that they are a part of. And the really interesting thing is when you read it, just how all of those 3 different points of view are connected. They almost universally came up with the same answers to the questions that I posed to them. So, yeah.
Sounds very, very exciting. And so the link to how to contribute to get the book published will be in the show notes, and also how to get hold of Lois and to get more information. And are you taking a list about those that want to purchase the book from you? Are you taking a list now, or how are you doing that?
Well, some of the
could people email you and say, "Hey, I want to be on the list of getting the book"?
You could if you wanted to. However, I will make sure that once it's published, that it will be available. It'll probably be up on Amazon, and I can provide a link for that at that time. So it'll be in book format.
Right.
paperback book format, and it will also be available on Kobo and Kindle.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Well, as always, it's wonderful catching up with you. And I hope when you're back up this way that you'll put me on your roster for another visit with tea and cookies. And if it's warm, we'll be out on the deck. It's great to see you and have this conversation, and we'll stay in touch. So when you move, which is coming up quickly, do you know where you're going to move to? Are you going to still stay in Sasquatch country, or what's up?
I really have no idea at this time. My brain is so full of doing all this stuff with the book and various other projects that I'm working on. It looks like we're probably going to spend at least 4 months in the motorhome, if not longer. So that'll be wherever the best place is for us to be in the motorhome. And when we're done with that, I'll start looking for a new house location to be in. But yeah. So
Right.
there's just too much. It's because Robert's health and him going back to work. There's working on the book, and then there's now we got a plan to move. It's just it's too much to all comprehend at one time. And I don't mind having some mystery.
Well, you need a place for your motorhome. There's a place in the back of our place, and we got it all figured out how to get water and to plug you in. So there you are.
Oh, that's perfect.
You never know.
I will remember that. Okay, thank you, Tyson.
All right, great. All right, all the best to you. Great talking to you.
Yes. Bye.
Healing Arts Academy, located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.